Hey guys, I'm Saurav, and in this video, let's talk about 7 tips to become a better photographer. So the first tip is to get the image right in camera. So basically you have post-processing to change the look of the images. But post-processing is like a cherry on the cake, where cherry is the post-processing and cake is the actual image that you take with your camera. Now if the cake is not good, doesn't matter how good the cherry is, it's not going to matter. So basically the original image that you take with your camera has to be good. When you see images taken by amazing professional photographers, they are not just because of post-processing. Of course, post-processing is important. It plays a huge role in photography. But what is equally important is how you take the image in camera. Always try to nail the exposures, the colors in camera so that in post-processing you don't have to do much work and the quality is still retained. So even though you have the flexibility in post-processing, make sure you're capturing most of the details in camera so that it becomes easier and you will get better images out of it. The next tip is to use lenses according to the situations. Now, for every situation, there are different kind of lenses that can be used. Like for example, if you're into street photography and you want a wider perspective, you can use a wide-angle lens. If you're much into wildlife photography and if you want to shoot subjects that are at a distance, you can use a telephoto zoom lens. So it actually depends a lot on the situation and what kind of images are you looking for. Every focal length has a different look, has a different depth to it. Even though you're capturing a very similar composition, a 50mm lens is going to give you a completely different image than a 200mm lens will give you. So make sure you have already in your mind what kind of image are you going for and you're using a lens according to that. Because once you take an image, then it is very difficult to change the lenses and again wait for that perfect moment. So make sure that you're always using the best lens that you have for the situation you want to shoot. The next tip is to keep the compositions simpler. Now, composition is extremely essential in photography because that is actually going to tell the story to the viewer, right? You're not going to tell the story to the viewer. The viewer will see the image, see the photograph and understand what's the actual subject and what the photographer wants to convey. So if the composition is too complex, if you're actually using too complex compositions for your images, it might become too difficult for the viewer to understand what the image is about. So make sure that you're using different compositions, maybe like rule of thirds, leading lines, symmetry. There are a lot of composition rules. You can obviously experiment and it's always recommended to experiment with different compositions. But at the same time, make sure you're not too much confusing the viewer and the composition is actually helping to tell the story rather than actually confusing it. The next tip is pre-visualization and planning. Now, when you see images taken by amazing photographers, you might think that they are just lucky to get such beautiful light, to get such beautiful climate, but it is not actually like that. Sometimes you can be lucky and you can get good images, but if you really want to capture better images consistently, you actually have to do some planning and research before you go to shoot. I have always told this in my video that photography is just not going on the location and pressing the shutter button. You have to do a lot of planning and a lot of research about the location you're going in. And when you have that kind of work done before you go to shoot, when you go to shoot, you actually have less amount of work to do. You can actually focus on the photography part rather than focusing on the climate and the weather since you have done your homework before going to shoot. So make sure next time you're photographing some Milky Way or any kind of subject, make sure to study and do some planning before you shoot so that when you go there, you get better images. The next tip is to observe other photographers and get inspired by their work. Nowadays, photography is such a huge art form and there's so many amazing photographers on social media. You can follow their photos, you can learn a lot just by seeing their images. You might have interest in different kind of genre and for every genre there are amazing photographers. So just by looking at their images, you actually can learn a lot. Just look at the images and try to understand the mindset that the photographer had and what is the kind of story that the photographer wants to tell. Just by doing this, you will develop a very similar mindset, a very similar vision, and when you want to shoot next time, since you have that vision already in you, you will see that you're continuously developing as a photographer and your images are slightly getting better and better gradually as you're shooting and practicing. So make sure to always get inspired and see various images to get the overall feel of photography. The next tip is to maintain a signature style and not just copying other photographers. Now, as I said, getting inspired by other photographers is very important because you develop a very similar vision and a mindset. But copying someone and being inspired is actually different. There's a very fine line and you actually have to understand that. Every photographer is different. Of course, you have to get inspired and you can learn a lot from other photographers, but always make sure that you also have some unique style that actually separates you from the rest of the crowd. If you see professional photographers, you might feel that the images are similar, but at the same time, they also have a very signature style that's unique to them. So make sure, even though you're getting inspired, even though you're learning a lot of things from your role models, make sure to add a kind of unique style or a unique signature from your side to separate your images from the rest of the images. The last but not the least is don't be pressurized. Now, sometimes photography can be extremely disappointing and extremely pressurizing. But the thing is, you have to be relaxed, okay? You might not always get the images you want, okay? The role models might get some different images. You might not get as good images as they are getting. But it's completely fine. It's not a competition. You actually have to enjoy it. Always remember, performance does not come from pressure. It only comes from passion. So be relaxed, okay? When you're shooting something, focus on the photography, focus on the aesthetic part, focus on the composition, and don't be pressurized. Be relaxed. Think with open mind and try to create better yet visually appealing images. And that is how you're going to be a better photographer. I hope these tips were helpful, and next time you shoot, you actually keep in mind these tips and try to put more efforts and try to motivate yourself to be a better photographer. So motivate yourself, motivate others, keep creating content, and I will also keep creating content for you guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. I will talk to you guys in the next one. Bye.